I'm just going to be the first one to admit that I really wish that I wasn't getting up here and preaching right now. Like, we should just do that, right? Like, no idea how hard that is to follow. Like, there's that, and then there's talking head man. I was telling Lenny that people are going to start making us sign a waiver before they film anything on the news because the way they get abused on into the future. There's a question as we look back and we think about what was this last year, and just to kind of be clear, the way our calendar year around here, our fiscal year, I suppose, is September through August, and so for us, this is the start of a new year and a chance to celebrate a year gone by. As we spent the last couple months trying to make sense of it, and obviously you spend the whole year trying to make sense of it, but just looking back, there's a question that's kind of risen to the surface for me personally that I think the year begs us to ask ourselves. It's a question that I think is certainly relevant to us as a community, as a movement, as a people trying to do this together, but in a way that I think is unique to Vision Weekend. I think it's also a question that's intensely personal and has the opportunity to be incredibly relevant in our own everyday lives as we think about marriages and finances and our future with God and all those different things. And it's this question of, what if the daily leads to the dream? I mean, what if it's the daily that leads to the dream, and that this is true of the cars that we drive and the houses that we live in and the careers that we hope for and the relationships that we aspire to have and the personal transformation that we hope God does in us? What if it's the daily that leads to the dream? I was thinking about this at the beginning of the week, and it just occurred to me that I kind of saw that unfold myself this last week, because some of you know I wasn't here last weekend. My wife and I, my family and I took off Thursday, drove back to Billings for a wedding. We had a wedding Friday night, and then Saturday morning, we got up and drove to Dillon because there's the Patagonia sale in Dillon on Labor Day weekend, and then there's a rodeo for We Are Cowboys. So we had to go be with our people. Even got the shirt to prove it. It was actually a total coincidence, and I thought, wow, to be honest, I kind of felt like an alien in Dillon, Montana over Labor Day weekend. There's a lot of cowboys there. Got nothing against them, but there's a lot of them there. Anyway, what occurred to me on Tuesday was that 4 nights, 5 days, almost 900 miles in the vehicle, I didn't change a single diaper. Nor did I ever deal with soiled pants whatsoever. I mean, there was that one time when I scared Teresa, but not once. And you know what else? And some of you young parents like Mikhail, I can already see the drool coming off the side of your mouth. Like, never once did I deal with projectile vomit. You know, the stuff that lodges itself in all the cracks and crevices of the car seat, and only engineers can clean the seat well enough to get it out, but for the rest of us, it just smells like sour milk for the rest of our time of raising kids. Nor did I ever have to army crawl back into the back of the car or the van, and I didn't have to put a single seatbelt on except for my own. Now, some of you are going like, you're lame. Which means you don't have little kids in diapers. Or you already forgot, because you used to. And some of you are going, well, no, actually you're just telling me exactly why I'm not ever going to have kids, which that's okay too. But it is a testament that the daily leads to the dream. Because it doesn't feel like that long ago when $200 a month was going to Costco to buy these things that strap around a baby's crotch area and then you throw them away, right? This is true in all kinds of ways, I think, in our lives. This daily leads to the dream stuff. I think for many of you, it's true of your career or your occupation, your job. You're working a job right now that there was a time you couldn't imagine getting paid to do what you do. I mean, you used to do it for free, and now you get paid to do it. Or there's a time when you worked the shift that you hate, and now you work the shift that you love. Maybe you love your job because of the salary you get. Maybe you just love it, frankly, because of the freedom that you have. Or maybe, again, like you get paid to do things that you never dreamt of loving your job that much. And yet the fact of the matter is, you didn't just land that job right out of high school or out of junior high. Like, it's the daily that's led to the dream. You went to class. You worked the graveyard shift. You worked the shifts no one else wanted to. You worked the job that no one else was willing to work. You were practicing when your friends were out playing. It's the daily that leads to the dream. Some of you are business leaders, maybe even a business owner. And people like myself, people in their 20s and 30s, they look at you and they just assume like it's always been easy street and that company's always gone really well for you. And yet what you understand is it was hard. And there were days where you almost quit, and there were days where you almost got fired, and there were days where the business was sucking so much money out of your life that you ate beans and rice. I mean, you understand that you don't just get a good business, you earn a good business. It's the daily. It's going to work and working hard every day. This afternoon after Dine and Dunk, a whole bunch of you will come home and watch football. And then you'll watch this game tonight that's completely meaningless because, like, who do you pull for when the Jets and the Cowboys are playing? It's like enemy 1 versus enemy 2. I don't even, it's just exhibition for the Bronco game tomorrow night. But here's what happens when we watch guys like NFL football players play, is we quickly forget how much work they put in to be there, right? And we look at guys like Tom Brady, and we look at these freakish 6'7", 325-pound left tackles, and we just treat it like it was their destiny to be that successful. And yet the fact of the matter is there's lots of 6'7", 320-pound guys that aren't left tackles in the NFL, if you know what I mean, right? The reality is Tom Brady wasn't destined to be the best quarterback in the NFL. Tipped my hand there, didn't I? He had to work hard. And he had to work hard probably from as far back as, he probably doesn't even have memories. It's the daily that leads to the dream. It's true of marriage. We'll do a series this winter after the first of the year that will just kind of hit on this idea that, like, the only thing that's required to fall in love is a heartbeat. Like, the real work is staying in love. Right? Like, the real work comes after the ceremony. Why? Because great marriage is the result of great daily decisions. Those of you that have raised your kids and maybe they're adults now, you get this. It's the daily that leads to the dream. When back in Billings, I got to go to that wedding, and it was of these couple kids that used to be in the youth group. They're not kids anymore. They're in their 20s. And it was so fun to just kind of watch these two, I think they're 24, 25-ish, who, they're not perfect, and nor are they telling anyone they are, but yet they've done a lot of things very, very well. And I found a lot of pleasure just watching their families, because I know both sets of families. And just the lightness on their feet, the pride in who they are and who their kids are. And yet the reality is, I'm sure they would say, it's the daily. If you're in debt, up to your eyeballs, and trying to get out, you understand that getting out of debt's not a one-day thing. It's a daily decision that involves lattes and movies and all kinds of things. And if you're someone that's got out of debt and worked hard to get out of debt, you understand it's a daily thing. So some of you are wealthy. Now, the trick here is if we said, like, who's wealthy? No one would raise their hand. And you're all going, like, you're not going to ask that, right? And I'm going to say, like, nope. But we are going to do a series in January that just kind of touches on that point. Like, okay, so how to be rich, because none of us thinks we're rich, and yet we kind of all are rich. But nonetheless, some of you are wealthy, and I'm meaning not in an American sense or in a global comparative sense, but in a, like, you're wealthy. Like, you've got a nice retirement account, you've got a paid-for house, whatever. And yet what you understand, again, what guys like me often don't, is that you're not rich because you had a job that paid 7 figures a year. You're not rich because of an inheritance. You're not rich because you hit the lottery. You're rich because you and your spouse, or maybe just you made these daily decisions. And now you're in your 50s and your house is paid for. Or now you're in your 40s and you're looking at just where you're at financially, and you're just like, wow, this is crazy. And it's taking the time to go like, no. It's the daily. It's the daily that leads to the dream. See, the trick here isn't, like, this isn't this new idea, right? Like, this is this principle, and all of you are kind of going like, okay, I hope you've got something else to say because I got that and I heard that and that makes sense. That's not the issue, right? The issue is it's hard. The issue is making the right decision, doing the right thing, pursuing excellence on a daily level. That's hard. My former boss and now friend from Harvest Vern, when we were in the final stages before we moved here, he would say to me repeatedly, Adam, vision is so cheap. It's cheap. Now, here's a guy who's been knocked around after leading a church for 10 years. It's cheap, Adam. You don't even have to get out of bed to be a visionary. The work, it's realizing that. Why? Because it's a daily decision. We can all sit down and have lots of caffeine and have this kind of high hair-raising moment and be all inspired. It's the daily. I heard this story on CBS. Well, I heard the CBS version of this story. It was this gal, here's kind of because, right, you get 2 minutes on CBS, and I understand that's the industry, I'm not taking shots at CBS, but this gal who was a single mother, she had one child. At 20 years old, he was shot to death at a house party in Minneapolis. He was murdered by a 16-year-old. The 16-year-old was very quickly tried, of course, and sentenced to 25 years in prison, and she said, admittedly, that when all that was going down, she wanted him to be caged for the rest of his life. But the CBS story was that it wasn't long after that that she forgave him. And really the CBS story was at this point in history now, he's out of prison. He got out after 17 years. And he's her neighbor. They live in the same apartment complex. she interacts with him like he's her son. He interacts with her like she's his mother. And you hear that and you go like, I mean, she was inspired by Christ. She talks about knowing from the first day that if, and these are her words, that if she didn't forgive him, the unforgiveness would eat her like cancer from the inside out. She knew that. But here's the non-CBS version, the part that you learn when you listen to her story that takes 30 minutes, is that she didn't show up in the prison to offer herself in relationship and forgiveness for 12 years. She was a Christ follower. She knew the effects it was going to have on her. She understood what Jesus called her to, and it took her 12 years. Not because she woke up someday in year 12 and went like, I think I'll do this, but because she made a bunch of tiny decisions. Isn't that freeing? Because we all hear like, forgive. Isn't it freeing to know that that beautiful story, that wasn't a one-day decision. That was the sum total of a whole bunch of decisions. And the dream, well, it was a result of the daily. Another guy wrote a book called Outliers, one of my favorite books that I've read in the last couple of years. Malcolm Gladwell is his name. He's just exploring like what makes extraordinary companies. And it's one of those books that's like part depressing because you're like, I'm not one of them, and part motivating because you're like, wow, that's an amazing story. He just explores companies, people, why they're extraordinary, and one of the things he comes up with is what he calls the 10,000-hour rule. His point is that the difference between the person who teaches the violin to high school students as an adult and the person who plays, in world-renowned orchestras as an adult is what he says, if you want to get really mathematical about it, 10,000 hours. What's 10,000 hours represent? Practicing for 4 when your friends are at the football game Friday night. Practicing for 6 when you'd really like to go watch a movie. It's the daily. And high achievers, they'll tell you they're not freaks of nature. There's a guy that will suit up for the Broncos named Von Miller. If you're annoyed by sports analogies, sorry. If you're annoyed by the Broncos, not sorry. It's not like they're good. Like, you should just feel sorry for me. Von Miller will suit up. He'll start as an outside linebacker tomorrow night. And already the media is treating him as like a can't-miss sensation. He was the number 2 pick in the draft this last year. His speed and size and athleticism is freakish. They're comparing him to Derek Thomas, which freaks me out a little bit. But here's the other side of the Von Miller story that you only know if you're obsessed and you read the Denver Post every day, is that after his freshman year at Texas A&M, he quit. He got in his 1982 regular cab Chevy, and he was headed back home. And his coach, was it Mike Sherman, I think, called his dad, told him that his son had quit. His dad called Vaughn, caught him on the cell phone. Vaughn answered. His dad said, pull the truck over to the side of the road. Vaughn pulled it over on the side of the highway. His dad proceeded to say, turn it around. Do a U-turn. Get back there. You can do this. It's just taking more work than you thought. It's the daily. But it's hard to remember that. It's hard to remember that the cars that we hope to drive or the houses we hope to live in, the state of our business or our finances or our family or the personal transformation in Christ, the dreams that we have for being a community that causes God's name to be hallowed, the dream to be the type of church that the most ardent critic of Jesus would be bummed if we no longer existed. It's a daily thing. Which raises the question, what if we can see it in the text? Wow, did I lose my Kindle or did someone steal it? Oh, wow. False accusations, they get you in trouble every time. What if we see this play itself out in Scripture? Think of Jesus. Let me just kind of present this idea to you. Did anybody have bigger dreams than Jesus? Anybody have higher aspirations? I mean, John 3:16, the way John understood it after Jesus' death and resurrection, was that God so loved the world that he sent his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. That's the world, that's everyone. I mean, it's either incredibly arrogant or insanely ambitious. That everyone would have a chance to get right with God through his life, death, and resurrection, through his grace. In Matthew 28, he said, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. That is a dream. I know Martin Luther's famous for his, but Jesus was bigger. And his dream, as we spent 2 years talking about, it wasn't just about people getting into heaven. Is that part of it? Absolutely. But it was about entire community restoration. It was about putting your hands back in the soil and becoming fully human. The person God made you to be, the community being put back together. Not utopianism. Yeah, we need God to consummate it ultimately. But this work of doing what we can here and now. That's ambitious. So what does he do? Does he come as a 30-year-old adult in an age of credibility and start doing his thing? No, he came as an infant, like with diapers, but like before diapers. Some of you do cloth diapers. I mean, there's like John Elway and you in my hero list. Yeah, like, he came in diapers, dependent upon his parents. Okay, so was he a child prodigy? You know, like 6 years old, like he was just astounding people? No, actually, it wasn't until he was 30 that he got started. And Luke, himself astounded by Jesus' childhood, says this: as Jesus grew up, he increased in wisdom. So he had to grow up, which messes with our theology. Like, okay, he was God and he's human, and yet, like, he had to learn to, like, brush his teeth, and he, like, wet his pants, and he, like, had to understand how to treat people. Wild. He increased in wisdom and in favor with God and with people. Okay, so at 30, does he show up in Jerusalem and go, I'm the king? Let's get this straight. I'm the temple. We can get rid of that. No, he didn't actually. Did he get in a boat and sail to Rome and walk up to Caesar and go, sorry, bad news, I'm the king of the world? No, he actually went to a place called Nazareth, which would be like you're saying like you're from Lincoln, Montana, or like Laurel, Montana, like backwoods, small, insignificant, nobody significant from there, no scholarship from there. And he just like did his thing in Nazareth with people who were just people. And they couldn't like cut him a check so that he could run for office. He just loved people in Nazareth. And then having done a lot of work in Nazareth, he went to like Lakeside. These 3 communities that are about the same size and just as significant in the grand scheme of the country. And he picked disciples. And he healed people. And he spoke at synagogue. And he went to weddings. And he grieved at funerals. And he had conversations with people. And he went to parties. And he had people throw stuff at him. And he had enemies. He just lived this normal, daily life. Dream is changing the world, and yet Jesus, I would argue, is a model of this idea that the daily leads to the dream. Andy Stanley, one of my very favorite teachers, he says it this way. He says there's a cumulative value to investing small amounts of time in certain activities over a long period of time. A lot of multi-syllable words there. There's a cumulative value to investing small amounts of time in certain activities over a long period of time. So I know this is Vision Weekend and we're going to get there. My challenge or my hope, my thought is I don't know where this lands for you. I don't know how this is relevant for you, whether it's in a marriage or maybe like a 6-month-old baby, like 18 can't come fast enough, or non-diapers can't come fast enough. Maybe it's a business venture. Maybe it's debt that you're working your way out of. I don't know where this lands. I guess my hope is that there's something encouraging, something challenging to realize that like the real work is in the daily stuff. Sitting down and waxing eloquent and coming up with these big ideas, that's the easy part. And yet Jesus empathizes with you. Now, how does this tie back to Narrate? How does this tie back to us as a movement? I want to give you a number, and it'll kind of serve as a background, and then I'll kind of talk about that number. So in 2009, 2010, our average weekend attendance was 178. This last year, it was 186, which means that we grew from year 1 to year 2 by 4.5%. Now, let me say a couple things. First of all, 4.5% is nothing to write home about. Nobody's writing articles about us. No journals are publishing anything on us. Like, it's nothing, right? Second thing is, I realize that for many of us, talking about attendance kind of makes you throw up in the back of your mouth a little bit. And I'm with you. It's why we only do that once a year, because having bad breath once a year is about all we can handle. So stick with me. I'm with you on that. This is not our culture. This is that, like, if you're checking Narrate out for the first time, this is a unique experience because we don't, like, do that. But I do want to say this. We've made it our ambition from the very beginning to serve and to matter. And we've said we're going to meet needs and we're going to serve people. And if we have to invent it, we'll do that. But otherwise, like, how can we help? And I think at times to our peril, that's been our posture. So having opportunities to matter, that's not been the issue. hasn't been the issue at all. Attendance, I think, is the best gauge we have, or at least one of the better gauges we have, of whether or not we're just kidding ourselves with that influence. Is the goal to get butts in seats? Absolutely not. Is the goal Sunday? Well, it's both, right? So I'm not saying that this is all about our attendance records. What I am saying is that I think it's one of the better measurements we have to go, like, are we really like influencing a community in a way that a church ought to influence a community? So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll take a bullet for that. We could talk about it later, but you can throw up and we'll do that together for the rest of the service. Here's why I tell that story. So about 6 months before I left from Billings, there was a guy named Fred, and I talk about him too much. You've heard him. He's this guy that I met with every other day since I was 19 and just talked about Jesus. And if you're new to following Jesus, I recommend finding someone like that. It's really helpful. He knew me well. I knew him well. He watched my thinking about the kingdom mold and shift and evolve. And so about 6 months out, I said, Fred, what do you think about this whole Narrate thing? Like, how do you think that's going to go? I was obviously looking for some level of approval and some reassurance, like, yeah, gangbusters, yeah, you're not crazy, you're leaving a job and moving. I mean, right? Like, we're looking for a community of us are putting a lot on the line, and I was just asking for someone to speak into that, searching for a compliment, perhaps. He said, Adam, have I told you about my friend Craig? I said, nope. He said, Craig, about 20 years ago, decided that he wanted to be a stockbroker. He had the degrees to support that, and so he went to a firm in town. He applied to be a stockbroker. He took an assessment as part of the interview process. He failed the assessment miserably. When he sat back down for the follow-up interview, they looked at him and kind of laughed and said, you're not supposed to be able to fail an assessment, but you've kind of proven that theory wrong. This thing says that you'd be a terrible stockbroker. He says, yeah, I figured that it would, but it's wrong. And in fact, I'm going to be a great stockbroker. Now, he wasn't an arrogant man. That's the way I'm making him sound. But he had a plan. And he began to explain to him, like, my plan's going to go different because I'm not going to do the high sales, high pressure deal. Like, I'm going to be very relational. And he kind of unpacked something that would be real familiar to many of us. And he said, so for the first couple years, you all and your assessment is going to look spot on. It'll look like hiring me was a terrible idea. But after that, things are going to slowly pick up, so much so, he said, that not only should you hire me, I'm going to request that you hire me at a higher wage than you would normally hire people at. I know it's getting hard to not convince you of the arrogant thing, but he's not. Like, that was his deal. And they hired him. And Fred said, Adam, for the first 2 years, it was ugly. He was watching the classified ads. And after that, things picked up. Not rapidly, not dramatically, slowly and surely. He said, Adam, today, so this would have been a few years ago, I don't know if this is still true today, Adam, today he's the biggest stockbroker in Montana. Now, I'm not saying that because I have ambitions for us to be the biggest church in Montana. What I'm saying is I think what Fred was pointing out was, Adam, I think it'll be the daily that leads to the dream. I think it'll be the right decision today and tomorrow and executing a relational plan. I think that'll be the key. Now, let me show you some things. More numbers, more vomit. 4.5% is the average, right? So I want you to look at some things that we started to see starting in March. In March, we grew by 11%. In April, 6%. Oh, wait, I got it wrong, sorry. Because some engineer came up to me after the first service and told me my math is wrong, for which I was thankful, and I learned that I've been doing percentages wrong my entire life. I told you, nothing significant comes from Laurel. I'm glad you got that. March, 12.4%. April, 6.7%. May, 10.3%. Now, do you see with the trend here? 4.5 was our average. What you're seeing right now is 10. June, 11%. July, we broke even. August, I can't read my writing, so 18. Now, right, like those of you who went to Laurel, you even can figure out that, like, when your average is 4.5 and you have 6 months that are over 10, well, it says something about the first 6 months, but it also says something about the trend on the back end of that. Now, I want to say a couple things before we move forward. We made a concerted effort as a staff 2 years ago, and we said we're not going to be a 9-month out of the year church. We're going to work just as hard in June and July and August when it's hard to show up at church. We're going to work just as hard on then as at providing excellent worship services and scattering in relevant ways as we do the other 9 months. But we get paid. Like, that really being possible involves you all, people who serve above and beyond the work you have to do every day at your job to feed yourself and your family and all those different things. I hope when you see that we grew 18% in August, August was our third biggest month of last year. Like, most pastors find a second job in August. We were growing, and growing like crazy. I hope if you're someone who served this summer, because let's just be honest, it takes more sacrifice in the summer than any other time, and I'm not in any way trying to slight those of you who didn't. Please don't hear that. Like, I totally respect the need to step away for the summer, and we value that and we encourage that. But I hope if you're someone who is a part of working really hard over the last 3 months, I hope that's incredibly gratifying to you. Because I would say the vision worked. Good job. That's a big deal. The bigger point that I'm trying to make here is I forgot all about Fred's little analogy prophecy, though it wasn't a prophecy. I forgot all about, I would remember it off and on, but when I started to see this stuff, and we started to see this stuff in the late spring, early summer, I remembered it and I went like, whoa, we see the daily leading to the dream. I would argue that last 6 months is representative of a whole bunch of you doing stuff that you've been doing for 2 years. And I hope you're encouraged by that the same can be true in marriage, and the same can be true in your finances, and the same can be true in your pursuit of Jesus. That sometimes it takes a whole bunch of daily decisions, and sometimes they don't add up for a long time. We see that trend in our finances as well. Speaking of vomit, church, finances, here we go. But we're just going to touch on it quickly. Let me just give you a couple months to just kind of give you a feel for trends. In September of 2010, you can see that our giving was 15-something. In November, turkey was expensive that year. Our giving was 11-some. Then look at May of this year and August of this year. Remember me standing up here in January? Some of you don't. You weren't here, but in January I stood up here and said, okay, guys, we've made it this far on the generosity of people who learned it in another church from another movement what it means to be generous with their stuff. We've existed that long on that, and if we're going to exist forward from here, it'll be because people who are getting excited about Jesus and meeting Jesus around Narrate are developing that discipline themselves. And to that, again, I say, way to go. Because the council wasn't sure that we were going to make it out of last year. We still bled 10 grand, but we made up a ton of ground. We grew by like 54%. So again, see what I'm saying? The daily leads to the dream. I think we also see it in our scattering opportunities. It used to be that we would have to send up weather balloons to get scattering opportunities, and now we're starting to try to figure out okay, how do we not overpromise and underdeliver because they're coming in, and you guys are catching the vision of serving friends and meeting needs as you see them, and now we're kind of going okay, so now how do we manage this because it's getting crazy, which is awesome. Sarah's math says that 150 of you scattered with us at least once last year. In a church that I say that we're a church of 300, and that's because, on any given weekend, about half your church is there, so blah, blah, blah. That's half of you. And here's a story that for me captures it maybe better than anything else. Last March or so, I got an email from my friend Amy Teagarden. She's somebody that I met when we first got started, because remember, we got fired up about pine beetles, and so she leads the city parks department, Parks and Rec department, and so we contacted her and went how can we help with pine beetles and all the LEAP stuff that was on the video, which we'll show when the service is over, by the way, so if you're bored, there's good stuff coming. The email said, just explained that the city had got this grant from the Center for Disease Control, the federal government essentially, and that the grant was given to, this is the third year of it, is given to an elite group of communities. I can't remember, 12 or something, am I right? 12, Rachel? 10 communities every year. That's freaky, sorry, I won't do that to you. 10 communities every year. I meant I won't call on you anonymously and you have to talk out loud because I know that some of you gives you hives. What she was saying in this email was that what the grant's designed is they recognize that there is an epidemic of inactivity and poor nutrition, and that it's ravaging our country. And so what they're doing is trying to stimulate creativity and ideas by giving these planning grants to communities who can explore, okay, how can we more creatively increase the level of activity in a community? Helena got one of those grants, one of 10 communities, third year of the deal. What she was explaining was that what followed then was she needed to build a team of 8 to 12-ish people who would put their arms around this thing and be a part of what is called a chart team. They use acronyms like 1985 in the church. I don't like the acronyms. They should just call it Narrate. Just kidding. But she had to build a team of 12 people. And what she was saying in the email was, I'd like Narrate to be a part of that conversation. What she was saying is, there's this grant that is about our community, And when I think of the stakeholders and who cares about our community and who cares about raising the level of physical activity, I think of this church called Narrate that she's never attended. No, that is not about me, and it's really not about us, but about God and the affirmation of, I think we're just getting started in the influence department. Just to give you a feel for, I just sit on the floor underneath the table at those meetings and eat crumbs, like the lady in the Gospels, right? Like she's unworthy. The other people in those meetings are like the mayor and the city manager and these big wheels from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I don't even talk. My name's Adam, and I'm from 5th grade. I think the daily has led to the dream of being a church that matters in our community. I heard an interview with a pastor who's in his 70s and wrapping up his ministry, as it were, who had been a part of a movement that had started small and over the course of time made quite an impact on his community. And the person interviewing him said, help me in my young church. Help me in my young movement. And he said, the biggest mistake that I think churches are making today is they think that they're one big decision from breaking out. They think they're one big initiative from being a big deal, from having lots of influence. He says, the fact of the matter is, and these are his words, not mine, the tortoise wins the race. And in the kingdom, the daily leads to the dream. Another way you could think about this is the crockpot analogy. Maybe you've heard Dave Ramsey talk about crockpots. I'm not a fan of the crockpot. I like dry food, not moist food. Ugh. I'm a hard person to have over for dinner. I'll eat a crockpot. Not a crockpot, but I'll eat from them. I'm just giving you my unbiased opinion that soggy food that just melts in your mouth like you were 6 months old is not good. It's the are you with me? Do we have any let's unite? Yeah, there's only one. So here's the way I think about next year: is what new ingredients are we adding? Without any we're not convinced that all of a sudden it's going to be nor is that the goal. What new ingredients are we bringing to the table? So as we think of next year, let me just power through a few things. First of all, I think Mikey's video in Narrate Kids 2.0 is representative of one of the biggest emphases that we have, and that is the staff and leaders in general, whether they're paid or not, that doesn't really matter, understanding that there's a call to figure out what do we do and do well, and what do we do and do poorly that we need to stop doing, and what do we do and do poorly and we need to get better at it. A general level of excellence and pursuing excellence and getting better and better at everything we do. It's what Mikey's doing with Narrate Kids. There's a remarkable team in place with lots of strengths and a lot of energy going, how do we get better? Malcolm Gladwell also wrote a book called Tipping Point, and in there he talks about Sesame Street, a show that many of us would look at and go slam dunk. Of course they're going to be successful. Jim Henson did it. How could it fail? But having spent countless hours studying Sesame Street, the conclusion that he came to was that they weren't successful because of the high level of creatives on the team, and they had an all-star team. But that they were so intentional about the details, that they were constantly doing a show, producing a show, analyzing and critiquing the show. One example is that the street was just originally supposed to be for people. Sesame Street, it was only supposed to be people. What they figured out was kids hated it. Big Bird was like a 2.0 version of Sesame Street. It came from the realization of paying attention to what they do and what they need to get better at, and they did Big Bird. And so that is a major part of our desire around here, is not getting static and getting better. The next biggest thing in my mind, or maybe the biggest thing, is we've hired James. Told you, everyone's going to want to sign a disclaimer for Lenny. Many of you know James. If you don't, he'll be around and part of the culture, and I invite you to meet him and email him, James at Narrate Church, if you want to grab coffee. James is a guy who's poured into high school students in Helena for 4+ years. He's a guy who's been a big part of Young Life during that time. He's a guy that the council identified a long time ago as a remarkable leader in our midst, a guy who was a part of this movement with us, and we just believed in his leadership, and there's lots of leaders here, and yet we think part of the key to being an influential church is getting to snag up some of those leaders and getting their best hours, if you know what I mean. And so this last spring, when we were looking at these numbers going this is going to be crazy, we're hiring him partially on money that we don't even have, but believing God is leading us to the council, which, by the way, we added Daryl Stordahl to the council. There's a tangent. Just this last week. The council made an offer to him, and we hired him, and he started September 1st. His charge is largely student ministries, to come alongside Tom, who already does a great job with junior hires, and to just put his arms around high school students and students in this community in general. The council's given him tremendous freedom in terms of the vehicles that he uses and how he does that. It's not about like us doing our silo, but just about raising the water level for high school students in our community. He's going to preach the first Sunday in October, and so you'll get a chance to hear him and that vision more. But the other part of that is we didn't just hire him to be a student pastor. We hired him to be a staff leader, to just be a part of the culture, and you'll see him become more and more a part of things. We're thrilled and honored and excited to have James on board. The other thing is Dodgeball 2012. We're excited about it. We're working hard on it already. We're working it. We're going to have 3 brackets this year, we hope. A junior high school bracket, a I'm a jerk because I'm too competitive bracket, and then a co-ed, I just want to have fun, don't be such a jerk bracket. So we're going to have 3 different brackets. We're working on hoping for a bigger venue and all. We just think that it's a really fun way to serve the community. Helena Hills for Trails, it's such a humbling experience. That is kind of the opposite of the day that leads to the dream. Is like, blah, it's kind of, it's become taken on a life of its own, and yet we're just thrilled to get to be a part of the Centennial Trail in our community, and think that in a few years when that thing's on the ground and we can look back and go like we played a significant role in that, that'll be a blast. We talk about international justice, and when I say that, I mean like the orphan, the widow, the oppressed. Here's been the tact we've taken so far. Is we've said, this has really been me. Coming from Mosaic, coming from the 20-something culture as a part of in Billings, we were passionate. We built lots of wells. We did lots of things like that. In my own personal finances, Teresa and I prioritized that. Planning a church, I kind of intentionally went like, no, it's Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. We're just going to move slow there. We're going to kind of serve our own before we think about international crises type stuff. And then this summer, I had 3 people invite me into 3 remarkable opportunities all in the same week to be involved in these different international things. Which, what I'm doing is, I took that as God's invitation to begin to explore and understand how does he want Narrate to participate with him with sex trafficking and all the crazy international injustices that are going on. And so what I'm inviting you to do is start praying and start reading. And what I'm doing is hitting the pause button on all 3 of those things and going like, it's probably going to take us the year to just understand where God's calling us. It's probably going to take us the year to develop a theology around here, and we'll do a series this spring, I suspect. But it's coming. And my gut is that Vision Weekend 2012, we'll be talking a lot about both what we've learned and where we're headed in that regard. Last is this. You know what that is? Okay, go to the next picture. That's a trailer in China somewhere. That's a trailer too. What I'm trying to tell you is it's portable. Last one, and we'll just stop there. So we had a friend give us this climbing trailer, and we went like, that'll be a fun chance to serve the community, take it to Alive at 5, blah, blah, blah. It's been a blast. My gut, and I'm taking the risk at over-promising, under-delivering, because we're not there yet. My gut is that that's run its course, and what we're beginning to toy with is liquidating the climbing wall and getting ourselves one of those bad Larrys. That'd be so fun to take that to Alive at 5 and stuff. And it's hilarious, these emails that Sarah's getting from this dude from China. And so, we're talking shipping it to a port, and we're in way over our heads. But if you pray, pray for that, because that could be a lot of fun. To continue our passion to just be a relevant presence in our community. Couldn't you just see James just taking that to Helena High and setting it up and then tearing it down and leaving because they kick him out and I don't know, we get sued? There's that. Okay, and I don't need to tell you that ultimately we do this because we believe that God is alive, that Jesus is real, that he transforms hearts. And this afternoon, in just a little bit at Spring Meadow, we'll baptize 7 people who have experienced Jesus in new ways. And so I just invite you to hear their story on the video. Lord, thanks for what you've done and what we're hopeful you're going to do. God, it's not our desire nor our illusion that we're the only church in town. We recognize that we're just one of many great churches and great movements, and yet we're humbled at the opportunity to narrate your story to our great community. Thanks, Lord, for the personal redemption you've done in hearts. whether that was of a saving sense and people meeting you for the first time this year, or you walking people through financial issues and marriage issues and friendship issues and destructive habit issues. God, we're grateful. We love you. Amen.